Good morning. Our topic today is a topic that is perhaps the hardest of all topics, loving our enemies. We're continuing on our series looking at the Sermon on the Mount to use that as a devotion each day. Today our passage is Matthew 5:43 through 48. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, this is a passage, as I said, that is quite hard. In fact, it's impossible for the natural man to do. People respond to what they're shown. When you're nice to someone, they usually respond nicely. When you're mean to someone, they usually respond meanly. So how can a believer love those who are wicked and evil towards them and slander them? Well, it's only by the grace of God. It's only by the love that we have been shown by Christ. So this is how we could tell the true and the false believer. There are many who proclaim Christianity, and they might even believe in the concepts of Christianity, but they don't have the power to not only resist sin, but to love their neighbor. And they don't have especially the power to love their enemies, those who would persecute them. So sometimes people can fake loving their brothers or sisters or people like that, right? But when they really have to show grace to someone who's not graceful for them or to them, this is where living out their faith becomes difficult. And this is why we need the Spirit of God in our life to follow Christ, because otherwise it's just rules and ideas that sometimes people make of Christianity, but it's the Spirit of God upon the believer that helps us obey the law of God. We're not looking to it in a legalistic way. We're just trying to live out the life that God intended us to live as we follow after Christ. We're going to read from Bonhoeffer now, a quick quote to what he say about this issue of loving our enemies. He says, to the natural man, the very notion of loving his enemies is an intolerable offense and quite beyond his capacity. It cuts right across his ideas of good and evil. More important still, to man under the law, the idea of loving his enemies is clean contrary to the law of God, which requires men to sever all connection with their enemies and to pass judgment on them. Jesus, however, takes the law of God in his own hands and expounds its true meaning. The will of God to which the law gives expression is that men should defeat their enemies by loving them. I've had people say to me, what you're advocating for will just allow evil to grow stronger. It'll never stop evil if we don't fight it, if we don't take a stand. But what Bonhoeffer shows here is it's actually quite opposite is true. We have a history, a human history is filled with people who have taken a stand against something else, and they're still warring. This tribe against that tribe, this country against that country, these people against those people. They never stop. People don't say, we've been fighting so long, why don't we just stop? We've lost so many people. Well, it's not worth it anymore. No, that just makes it all the more reason that they fight. If we quit now, all of our friends and all of our generations of families that have died in vain. We must keep the war going. The way we defeat evil, the way we defeat our enemy, as Bonhoeffer says here, is to love him. That's how God has made the defeat of evil happen. So it's contrary to our thinking, but this is how God has endowed it. In the New Testament, our enemies are those who harbor hostility against us, not those against whom we cherish hostility, for Jesus refuses to reckon with such a possibility. So it's important to note there, the Christian really has no enemies. Okay, we don't ever say that's our enemy over there, but there are going to be people that consider us their enemies. So when Jesus is saying love your enemies, he's not talking about the Christian hating others and saying love these people you hate, because that's an impossibility. We're called to love those who hate us. So if we have enemies, if we have people we hate, we need to do a heart check. We need to do a reality check. The Christian must treat his enemy as a brother and requite his hostility with love. His behavior must be determined not by the way others treat him, but by the treatment he himself receives from Jesus. It has only one source, and that is the will of Jesus. Are we living that out? The will of Jesus. That's the source of all things. Are we not only showing our family and our neighbors and our brothers in church love, but are we loving all mankind? Are we able to return their hatred and hostility with grace and mercy and love? Because that's a true sign and a fruit of the Spirit, that we're truly walking with Christ. And so we need to pray that the Lord softens our hard hearts and our minds. And sometimes we have good reason to be angry with people, but the Lord wants us to reflect the grace and mercy He's shown us. For we've all sinned against God and are deserving of His judgment, and yet He has been gracious and merciful to us. May we return that grace to others. May our enemies be weakened by the fact that we are people of love, that have no war and hatred within us. And may that war and hatred stop as they cease to be able to continue to lie and slander and hate when we respond in love. And even if they don't, we know we're serving our Master, who is able to keep us and sustain us through all trials and tribulations. Have a blessed day. We'll see you tomorrow.